The boy's tears were made of blood. Elena froze mid-step, the silver serving tray trembling in her hands as she watched crimson droplets slide down the pale child's cheeks and splash onto the pristine white tablecloth. The entire banquet hall had gone deathly silent. 20 vampire nobles sat motionless around the obsidian table, their wine goblets suspended in midair, their ancient eyes fixed on the small figure at the head of the table. The child, no more than 8 years old in appearance, sat rigid in his ornate chair, his small hands clenched into fists, his midnight black hair falling over his face as he desperately tried to hide the bloody tears that wouldn't stop flowing. Wait before the next revelation happens. If this mystery has already captivated you, let us know where you're following this story from. To make sure you don't miss any unexpected alliances or awakened powers, subscribe and join our circle. The game is about to change. Now, back to the scene. The vampire king, Alaric Thornhaven, sat to the boy's right. His impossibly beautiful face carved from marble, his silver eyes containing centuries of cold calculation. He didn't move. He didn't reach for his son. He simply stared ahead, as if the child's distress was nothing more than an embarrassing breach of etiquette at a formal dinner. Elena had been working in the castle kitchens for exactly 3 weeks. 3 weeks since she'd been brought here in chains after her village was destroyed. 3 weeks since she'd learned that vampires were not myths but the actual rulers of the Northern Territories. 3 weeks since her entire world had shattered and reformed into something darker and stranger than any nightmare. But in those 3 weeks, she had never seen this. The head steward, a thin vampire named Castellan with spider-like fingers, appeared at her elbow. "Move along," he hissed, his breath cold against her ear. "Serve the 4th course. Pretend you see nothing." Elena's feet remained rooted to the floor. She was a chef, had been the best pastry chef in her village actually, but here she was reduced to serving staff, dressed in a plain gray uniform that marked her as human property of the Thornhaven household. She should obey. She should move. She should absolutely not draw attention to herself. Instead, she set down the tray and walked directly toward the crying child. The gasps around the table were like wind through a crypt. "Human," Castellan's voice cracked like a whip. "Return to your station immediately." Elena ignored him. She pulled a clean handkerchief from her apron pocket, the one embroidered with small blue flowers that her mother had made, the only possession she'd been allowed to keep, and knelt beside the boy's chair. "Don't cry," she whispered, gently dabbing at the blood tears on his cheeks. "It's all right. Whatever it is, it's going to be all right." The boy's eyes flew open, startling violet eyes, so different from his father's silver, and he stared at her as if she were an apparition. Up close, she could see that he was trembling, that his small body was racked with some terrible internal struggle. "What?" The vampire king's voice cut through the air like a blade of ice. "Do you think you are doing?" Elena's survival instincts finally kicked in. She was kneeling beside the most powerful vampire in the Northern Territories, touching his son without permission, disrupting a formal dinner with the kingdom's most important nobles. She could be killed for this, would be killed for this. But she didn't lower the handkerchief. She continued to gently wipe the blood from the boy's face. "He's crying," she said simply, her voice somehow steady. "Someone should help him." "He is not crying," Alaric said, each word precisely enunciated. "He is defective." Elena's hand stilled. She looked up at the vampire king, at his perfect, emotionless face, and felt something hot and angry unfurl in her chest, something that overrode her fear. "He's a child," she said, "and he's crying bloody tears. That's not defective. That's pain." The silence that followed was so complete that Elena could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. She had just contradicted the Vampire King in front of his entire court. There was no coming back from this. Alaric rose from his chair in one fluid motion. He was tall, impossibly tall, and when he looked down at her, Elena saw death in his silver eyes. But before he could speak, the boy grabbed her hand. His small fingers wrapped around hers with surprising strength, and when Elena looked at him, she saw that his mouth was moving. No sound came out. The child was trying to speak but couldn't, yet his eyes were desperate, pleading. "Can you read lips?" Elena asked gently. The boy nodded frantically. He mouthed something, and Elena leaned closer, focusing intently on the shapes his lips made. "It hurts when I try to speak." Elena's professional instincts, the ones that had made her a master chef despite her young age of 23, kicked into overdrive. Physical pain associated with a specific action. She'd seen something similar once when a kitchen boy had swallowed lye by accident. The damage to his throat had made speaking agony. "Your throat?" she asked. "Does your throat hurt?" The boy nodded, and fresh blood tears spilled down his cheeks. "When did it start?" Elena asked, forgetting entirely that she was still on her knees in front of the Vampire King, that every noble in the room was watching this bizarre scene unfold. The boy held up both hands, fingers spread. Then he held them up again. 20 days. The pain had started 20 days ago. And the tears? Do they come every time you try to speak? Another nod. "Has anyone examined your throat?" Elena asked. "A doctor? A healer?" The boy shook his head, his expression becoming bitter. He mouthed new words. "They think I'm broken, wrong." "You're not wrong," Elena said firmly. She stood up, still holding the boy's hand, and turned to face the Vampire King directly. "Your Majesty, your son isn't defective. He's injured or ill. Something is wrong with his throat. He needs a physician." Alaric's expression hadn't changed, but something flickered in the depths of his silver eyes. Something that might have been surprise, or might have been irritation. "My son," he said slowly, "has been examined by 12 physicians, including the royal healer. They found nothing wrong. The consensus is that his silence is psychological, a weakness of character." "Then they're all idiots," Elena said before she could stop herself. The sharp intake of breath from 20 vampire nobles was almost comical. Castellan looked like he might faint, if vampires could faint. "I mean," Elena amended quickly, "though the damage was already done. With all due respect, Your Majesty, if the boy is in physical pain when he tries to speak, and if that pain is causing blood tears, then there's something physically wrong. That's not psychology, that's physiology." "And you," Alaric said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "are an expert in vampire physiology?" "No," Elena admitted, "but I am an expert in symptoms and reactions. In the kitchen, you learn to read ingredients, to understand how different substances interact, what happens when something is wrong with a component. This," she gestured to the boy, "is a reaction to something, a symptom of an underlying problem." Alaric studied her for a long moment. Then he looked at his son, really looked at him, perhaps for the first time in weeks. The boy was still holding Elena's hand like a lifeline, his violet eyes fixed on his father with an expression of desperate hope. "What is your name?" Alaric asked. "Elena. Elena Vasquez." "Elena Vasquez," he repeated, as if testing the name. "You were brought here from the village of Blackwater, correct? After the incident." The incident. That's what they called it. The massacre that had killed her parents, her friends, her neighbors. the massacre ordered by this very king because the village had harbored a vampire hunter. Yes, Elena said, her voice tight. You were listed as a pastry chef in the acquisition records. I was the pastry chef. Head chef, actually. I ran my own bakery. Something that might have been amusement touched the corner of Alaric's mouth. And yet here you are, pretending to be a physician. I'm not pretending anything, Elena said. I'm just saying that your son is in pain, and someone should actually figure out why, instead of dismissing him as broken. Father. The word was barely a whisper, rough and cracked, but it echoed through the banquet hall like a thunderclap. Everyone turned to stare at the boy. He had spoken. For the first time in 20 days, he had pushed through the pain to make a sound. The boy's face was contorted in agony, more blood tears streaming down his cheeks, but he forced out another word. Please. Then he collapsed forward, his small body convulsing. Elena caught him before he hit the table. He needs a healer now, she said urgently. Not tomorrow, not after dinner. Now. For the first time since Elena had entered the hall, Alaric moved with speed. He swept his son into his arms, cradling the small body against his chest. Castellan, he barked, fetch the royal healer immediately. Tell her it's urgent. He looked at Elena, his expression unreadable. You, come with me. Elena didn't question. She followed the vampire king as he strode out of the banquet hall, his son limp in his arms. Behind them, she could hear the eruption of whispered conversations, the scandal of the evening already being dissected by the nobles. They moved through corridors of black marble and silver filigree, past tapestries depicting ancient battles and vampire coronations. Elena had never been in this part of the castle before. Servants like her were confined to the kitchens and lower levels. Alaric pushed open an enormous door with one hand, revealing a chamber that took Elena's breath away. It was clearly the prince's bedroom, but it looked more like a museum. Shelves lined every wall, filled with books, scrolls, curiosities from around the world. A telescope stood by the window. Musical instruments lay carefully arranged on stands. Maps covered one entire wall, marked with pins and notes. He's brilliant, Alaric said quietly, laying his son on the enormous bed. Did you know that? At 8 years old, he spoke 7 languages fluently. He can solve mathematical equations that stump scholars 3 times his age. He composes music that makes ancient vampires weep. Elena stood awkwardly by the door. This sudden vulnerability from the feared vampire king was more terrifying than his anger had been. And then, one day, he stopped speaking, Alaric continued, sitting on the edge of the bed, one pale hand resting on his son's chest. Just stopped. I thought it was defiance at first, a child's tantrum. Then I thought it was fear. Had witnessed something traumatic, perhaps. The physicians found nothing wrong, no damage, no disease. So he paused, I began to believe them, that there was something fundamentally broken inside him, a weakness. You're wrong, Elena said softly. Sir, you're wrong. I saw his face when he tried to speak. That's not psychological. That's real, physical pain. The door burst open, and a tall vampire woman in flowing purple robes entered, carrying a leather bag. Her hair was pure white, her eyes a startling gold. Your Majesty, she said, bowing slightly. Castellan said it was urgent. Examine him again, Alara, Alaric said. And this time, look specifically for anything that might cause pain during speech, physical damage or obstruction to the throat or vocal cords. The healer, Ilara, moved to the bedside. She placed her hands on either side of the boy's neck, her eyes closing in concentration. Elena watched, fascinated, as a faint golden glow emanated from the healer's palms. "I'm going deeper than before," Ilara murmured, looking at the cellular level. She stopped, her eyes snapping open. "Oh, gods!" "What?" Alaric leaned forward. "What is it?" "Silver," Ilara said, her voice shaking. "There are microscopic fragments of silver embedded in his vocal cords and throat lining. They're causing constant inflammation and damage. Every time he tries to speak, the vibrations make the silver fragments shift, tearing the tissue further." The color, what little there was, drained from Alaric's face. "Silver? But how? We have no silver in the castle. It's forbidden, deadly to vampires." "Someone put it there deliberately," Ilara said grimly. "This is poisoning, Your Majesty. Attempted murder." Elena's mind raced. Silver poisoning, delivered in a way that would be activated by speech, which meant someone wanted to silence him, she said aloud. Not kill him, just make sure he couldn't talk, couldn't tell something. All three pairs of eyes turned to her. "Can you remove it?" Alaric asked the healer, his voice deadly calm. "It will be delicate," Ilara said. "The fragments are so small, so deeply embedded. One wrong move and I could damage his vocal cords permanently. But yes, I believe I can." "Then do it. Now." "Wait," Elena interjected. "If someone did this to him, if they wanted him silent, shouldn't you find out what he knows first, before whoever did this realizes he's being treated?" Alaric stood, and Elena saw something in his eyes she hadn't expected. Respect. "You," he said to her, "you're not going back to the kitchens." What? You saw what no one else saw." You acted when no one else would, and you think strategically. He turned to Ilara. "How long until you can safely remove the silver?" "I need to prepare. 2 hours, perhaps 3. I'll need specialized instruments and an assistant." "Do whatever you need." Alaric looked back at Elena. "In the meantime, you will stay here, with my son. When he wakes, you will ask him, gently, what he knows, what he saw or heard that someone wanted silenced." "Me?" Elena's voice came out higher than intended. "Why me? I'm just a—" "You're the only person he's trusted in 20 days, Alaric said simply. "He spoke for you, nearly killed himself doing it. So yes, you." Before Elena could protest further, Alaric swept out of the room, leaving her alone with the unconscious prince and a healer who was giving her a very appraising look. "That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever seen," Ilara said, beginning to unpack instruments from her bag. "Probably both." "I didn't think," Elena admitted. "I just saw him crying and I couldn't walk away." "Most humans would have." Ilara held up a thin silver blade, then winced and quickly wrapped it in cloth. "Sorry, force of habit. Anyway, most humans in your position would have kept their heads down. Survival instinct." "My survival instincts are clearly broken." Ilara laughed, a surprisingly warm sound. "Maybe, or maybe you're just decent. It's rarer than you'd think, decency. Especially here." She glanced at the sleeping prince. "His name is Damien, by the way. Prince Damien Thornhaven. You've been calling him the boy." "No one told me his name," Elena said softly. "In 3 weeks, I've never heard anyone speak it." "That's because most people here pretend he doesn't exist. An imperfect prince is an embarrassment. Better to ignore him until he either fixes himself or, well, or what? Or is quietly removed from the succession entirely." There are factions in this court who would very much like to see Damien declared unfit, who would benefit greatly from a different heir. Elena sat down in a chair beside the bed, studying Damien's pale face. Even in sleep, Even with bloodstains on his cheeks, he looked ethereal, beautiful in the way all vampires were beautiful, but with something else, something more human in the softness of his features, the vulnerability of his small form. "He's only 8, she said. "Why would anyone want to hurt a child?" "Power," Ilara said simply. "It's always about power. Alaric has ruled for 300 years, but he's not immortal. None of us truly are. We can be killed. And when a vampire king dies, his heir takes the throne. There are those who would prefer a different heir, someone more malleable. So they tried to silence Damien, make him seem weak or broken so he'd be removed from succession. That would be my guess." Ilara pulled out what looked like a magnifying glass made of crystal, but the question is, what did he witness that required such drastic measures? They worked in silence after that, Ilara preparing her instruments while Elena kept watch over the sleeping prince. About an hour later, Damien's eyes fluttered open. He saw Elena first, and something like relief flooded his violet eyes. "Hey," Elena said gently, moving closer. "You're okay. The healer knows what's wrong. She's going to fix it." Damien's lips moved, forming careful words. "You stayed." "Of course I stayed. I wasn't going to leave you." Elena picked up a small notebook and pencil from the bedside table. Clearly, Damien had been using these to communicate. "Can you write? Would that be easier than trying to speak?" Damien nodded gratefully and took the notebook. His handwriting was elegant, precise. "Thank you. No one has been kind to me in so long." Elena's heart clenched. "Well, I'm going to be kind to you from now on. That's a promise." She paused, then decided to be honest. "But Damien, I need to ask you something important. The healer says someone put silver fragments in your throat on purpose, to hurt you, to keep you from speaking." Damien's hand tightened on the pencil. "Do you know why?" Elena asked softly. "Did you see something? Hear something?" For a long moment, Damien just stared at her. Then, slowly, he began to write. "I saw Uncle Cyrus. He was in Father's study late at night. I couldn't sleep, was going to the library. He was going through Father's private papers, the ones about the succession laws. He was with someone, a woman I didn't recognize. They were talking about changing the rules, about making sure I would never take the throne. The woman saw me. She smiled. Then the next day, my throat started hurting." Elena read the words twice, her blood running cold. "Cyrus? That's your uncle? The king's brother?" Damien nodded. "And he's trying to change the succession so you can't inherit?" Another nod, more emphatic this time. Ilara had stopped her preparations, reading over Elena's shoulder. "This is treason," she breathed. "High treason. If Cyrus is plotting to usurp his nephew." "He's been telling everyone I'm broken," Damien wrote quickly, his handwriting becoming messier in his haste. "Saying I'm not fit to rule, that Father should name a new heir before it's too late. Some of the nobles believe him." "Some of the nobles are idiots," Elena said firmly. "You're not broken. You were poisoned. There's a big difference." The door opened, and Alaric returned, followed by 2 vampire guards. His silver eyes swept the room, landing on the notebook in Damien's hands. "What did you learn?" he asked Elena directly. Elena hesitated. She was about to potentially start a war within the royal family. But Damien was looking at her with those pleading violet eyes, and she remembered his bloody tears, his silent suffering. "It was Cyrus," she said, "your brother." "Damien saw him going through your private papers, plotting to change the succession. A woman was with him. We don't know who. When they realized Damien had witnessed them, they poisoned him to keep him silent. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Alaric's face remained perfectly calm, but his eyes blazed with an inner fire that made Elena want to step backward. "Cyrus," he repeated softly. Then, to the guards, "Bring me my brother, now. Tell him it's urgent. Do not let him leave the castle." The guards bowed and vanished with supernatural speed. Alaric moved to his son's bedside. For a long moment, father and son simply looked at each other. Then Alaric did something Elena never expected. He knelt beside the bed, bringing himself to his son's eye level. "I failed you," he said quietly. "I believed you were weak when you were being systematically destroyed. I let them convince me that you were broken. I'm sorry, Damien." Tears, regular tears, not blood, filled Damien's eyes. He reached out, and Alaric took his hand. "Can you fix him?" Alaric asked Alara, not taking his eyes off his son. "Yes, Your Majesty. The procedure will take about an hour. There may be some residual soreness, but he should be able to speak normally again within a day or two." "Then do it. I'll stay here. I want to watch." Alara nodded and began her work. Elena moved to step out of the room to give the royal family privacy, but Alaric's voice stopped her. "Elena Vasquez." She turned. "Yes, Your Majesty? You will stay as well. Damien trusts you. That is not a gift I take lightly." His silver eyes met hers. "After my brother is dealt with, we will discuss your new position." "My new position? You will no longer work in the kitchens. You will be Damien's companion, tutor, protector, whatever title you prefer. But you will stay with him, help him, be the one person in this cursed court he can trust absolutely." Elena's mind reeled. "I'm human. I'm a prisoner here." "I'm not. You're brave and observant, and you care about a child everyone else had written off," Alaric interrupted. "That makes you more qualified than any noble in my court." Damien was writing frantically in his notebook. He held it up. "Please, Elena, stay with me, please." How could she say no to that? To those desperate violet eyes? To this poisoned, silenced child who had suffered so much? "All right," she said softly. "I'll stay." The healing process was fascinating and disturbing in equal measure. Alara's hands glowed with that golden light as she worked, her eyes closed in deep concentration. Elena could see the faint shimmer of magic surrounding Damien's throat, could see the moment when Alara began extracting the silver fragments. They emerged from his skin like tiny slivers of starlight, each one dropping into a glass vial that Alara had positioned nearby. Damien's face was tense with pain, but he never made a sound. Alaric held his other hand the entire time, his expression carved from ice, but his grip gentle, almost tender. It took exactly 53 minutes. When Alara finally stepped back, wiping sweat from her brow, the vial contained 27 microscopic fragments of silver. "It's done," she said. "The tissue will heal quickly. Vampire regeneration should repair the damage within 24 hours. But he should rest his voice for now. No speaking until tomorrow." Damien nodded, then carefully mouthed, "Thank you." "Thank Elena," Alara said, beginning to pack her instruments. "She's the one who figured out something was wrong. The rest of us were ready to give up on you." Before anyone could respond, the door burst open. One of the guards stood there, his face grim. "Your Majesty," he said, "Lord Cyrus is gone. His chambers are empty. His servants say he left the castle an hour ago, claiming you'd summoned him to the northern watchtower." Alaric rose slowly, his expression terrifying in its calmness. "Search every corner of this castle and the surrounding lands. I want him found, alive. There's more, Your Majesty. We found this in his study." The guard held out a letter. Alaric took it, read it, and his jaw tightened. "What does it say?" Elena asked, then immediately regretted speaking. She had no right to ask. But Alaric answered anyway. It's a draft petition to the High Council, requesting that Damien be declared unfit and removed from the line of succession due to his mental incapacity and inability to communicate. It's dated 2 weeks from now. He was going to formally submit it once he was certain Damien couldn't defend himself. But he can now, Elena said. Damien can tell everyone what really happened. Yes, Alaric looked at his son. Yes, he can. Which is why Cyrus fled. He knew his plot would be exposed. He'll come back, Ilara said quietly. Men like that always do. They can't help themselves. He'll have allies, resources. This isn't over. No, Alaric agreed. It isn't. But now we know the enemy. Now we can prepare. He turned to Elena. Which is why I need you. You think like a human, strategically, practically. You saw what we missed. I need that perspective, especially now. Elena wanted to protest, to say she wasn't qualified for any of this. But Damien was looking at her with such hope, such trust, that she found herself nodding instead. I'll help however I can. Good. Alaric moved toward the door. Ilara, stay with them tonight. Post guards outside. Elena, do not leave Damien's side. If Cyrus is desperate enough, he may try something foolish. Then he was gone, leaving Elena alone with a vampire healer, a poisoned prince, and a task she had no idea how to accomplish. Ilara settled into a chair near the fireplace, pulling out a book. You should rest, she told Elena. There's a servant's room attached to the prince's chambers. You can sleep there. But Elena couldn't sleep. She sat beside Damien's bed, watching the rise and fall of his chest, marveling at how quickly her life had changed. 3 weeks ago, she'd been a chef in a small village. Now she was, what? A companion to a vampire prince? A witness to royal treason? Damien's eyes opened. He looked at her and smiled. A real smile, the first she'd seen from him. Then he did something that surprised them both. He reached for the notebook and wrote, "Will you teach me to bake?" Elena blinked. What? Damien wrote more. "You said you were a pastry chef, the best in your village. I've read about baking, but I've never tried it. After my voice heals, after everything settles, will you teach me?" You want to learn to bake? Elena couldn't help but smile. You're a vampire prince. Don't you have more important things to learn? I know 17 languages, advanced mathematics, military strategy, political theory, and classical music composition, Damien wrote. But I don't know how to make bread. That seems like an important gap in my education. Elena laughed, actually laughed, for the first time since she'd been captured. All right, she said. When this is all over, when you can speak again and your uncle is dealt with, I'll teach you to bake. I'll teach you everything I know. Damien's smile widened. He wrote one more line. It's a promise. It's a promise, Elena agreed. She didn't know it then, but that promise would change everything. Not just for Damien, not just for her, but for the entire kingdom. But that story would have to wait. For now, there was a traitorous uncle to find, a plot to unravel, and a prince to protect. Elena settled back in her chair, prepared for a long night of watching and waiting. She was no longer just a servant. She was a protector, a friend, and possibly, if she survived what was coming, something more. The game, as she'd said in that mandatory call to action at the beginning of this strange tale, had changed. And Elena Vasquez was ready to play. The morning light filtered through the stained glass windows of Damien's chamber, painting rainbow patterns across the floor. Elena had dozed fitfully in her chair, startling awake at every small sound. Ilara had maintained her vigil by the fireplace, occasionally checking Damien's throat with gentle magical touches. Damien himself had slept peacefully for the first time in weeks, the absence of constant pain finally allowing his body to rest. When he woke, his eyes found Elena immediately. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, remembering Ilara's instructions. "Not yet," Elena said gently. "One more day. Let everything heal properly." Damien nodded and reached for his notebook. "Is father back?" "Not yet, but I'm sure he'll come soon." As if summoned by her words, the door opened and Alaric entered. He looked tired, actually tired, which Elena hadn't thought possible for a vampire. His silver eyes had shadows under them, and his usually immaculate appearance was slightly disheveled. "Report," he said to Ilara. "The healing is progressing well, Your Majesty. By tomorrow evening, he should be able to speak without pain. Full vocal recovery within 3 days." Alaric nodded. Then, to Elena's surprise, he pulled up a chair and sat down beside her, facing his son. "Cyrus crossed the border into the Eastern Territories," he said quietly. "He has allies there, old vampires who never approved of my rule, who think the throne should pass to someone older, more traditional. They'll shelter him, at least temporarily." "What will you do?" Elena asked. "What I must. Declare him an enemy of the crown. Send forces to retrieve him." Alaric's jaw tightened. "He's my brother. We were children together, fought together, ruled together for a century. But he tried to destroy my son. That cannot be forgiven." Damien was writing frantically. He held up the notebook. "The woman, the one who was with him. She was the one who poisoned me. I remember now. She offered me sweets after I saw them. Special treats, she said. Said they were from father. I ate them because I was hungry, because I trusted her." "Can you describe her?" Alaric asked. Damien's pencil flew across the page. "Tall, dark hair, red eyes, then. Older vampire, then. Wore a medallion with a serpent. She called Uncle Cyrus my lord, but there was something else. They were close, intimate." Alaric went very still. A serpent medallion, red eyes, intimate with Cyrus. He looked at Ilara. "Does that sound like anyone you know?" "Lady Seraphine," Ilara said immediately, her voice tight. "She's part of the old guard. Came from the Eastern Territories 50 years ago, claiming to seek asylum. Cyrus sponsored her entry at court. She's been his constant companion ever since." "And I let her walk freely in my castle," Alaric said bitterly. "Let her near my son. I was a fool." "You trusted your brother," Elena said. "That's not foolish. That's human." Alaric's laugh was harsh. "I am not human. I'm a vampire king. I should have seen this coming. Should have—" He stopped, his hand reaching out to gently touch Damien's shoulder. "I should have protected you better." Damien set down the notebook and covered his father's hand with his own small one. The gesture said everything words couldn't. A knock at the door interrupted the moment. Castellan entered, bowing low. "Your Majesty, the council is demanding an audience. They'd heard rumors about Prince Damien's condition and Lord Cyrus's disappearance. They want explanations." "Of course they do," Alaric said wearily. "They smell blood in the water. Opportunity." He stood. "Tell them I'll address the full court tonight, not before." "And Castellan?" "Yes, Your Majesty. Post additional guards at Damien's door. No one enters except Ilara, Elena, or myself. No exceptions." Castellan bowed again and withdrew. "I should go," Alaric said to Damien. "I have preparations to make." "But tonight, at the court assembly, you will stand beside me. You will show them that you are not broken, not weak, not unfit. You will be the prince they need to see." Damien nodded, though Elena could see the fear in his eyes. "And Elena will be there too," Alaric added, "wearing court dress, not a servant's uniform, as your official companion and protector." "Wait," Elena said, "I can't go to a court assembly. I'm under my protection and employed in an official capacity," Alaric interrupted. Anyone who questions your presence will be questioning my judgment. I don't think they'll be foolish enough to do that. Not tonight." He swept out of the room before Elena could protest further. "Well," Elara said, a hint of amusement in her voice, "looks like you're moving up in the world. From kitchen servant to royal companion in less than 24 hours. That might be a record." Elena sank back into her chair. "This is insane. I don't know anything about court politics or vampire customs or—" Damien was writing again. He held up the notebook. "You know the most important thing. You know how to be kind. That's rarer here than you think." "The boy has a point," Elara said. "Most of the court is made up of vampires who've lived for centuries, who've forgotten what genuine compassion looks like. You'll stand out, certainly, but that might not be a bad thing." "Or it might get me killed," Elena muttered. "Possibly," Elara agreed cheerfully. "But you were probably going to die eventually anyway. Might as well make it interesting." Despite everything, Elena found herself smiling. That's a terrible philosophy. And yet, here we all are, living by it. The day passed in a strange bubble of waiting. Elena was measured for court dress by a seamstress who appeared with an entourage of assistants, all of whom looked at her with undisguised curiosity. Damien entertained himself by showing Elena his collections, books in languages she couldn't read, maps of places she'd never imagined, musical instruments she'd never seen. He couldn't speak, but he communicated constantly through his notebook, and Elena found herself genuinely enjoying his company. He was curious about everything, asking her detailed questions about baking chemistry, village life, human traditions. He wanted to know about her family, her bakery, what had made her love cooking. And Elena found herself telling him things she hadn't spoken about since the massacre, about her mother teaching her to make the perfect pie crust, about her father's laugh when he tasted her first successful soufflé, about the small joy of watching customers' faces light up when they bit into her pastries. Damien listened, truly listened, in a way no one had in a long time. "I'm sorry about your family," he wrote. "I'm sorry my father's order took them from you." Elena paused. She'd been trying not to think about that, about the fact that this kind boy's father had ordered the destruction of her entire world. "It wasn't your fault," she said finally, "and I don't know if this makes me a traitor to my people, but I don't think it was entirely your father's fault either. There was a hunter in our village. He'd killed 3 vampires. Your father was retaliating, protecting his people. It was wrong. God, it was so wrong. But I understand the logic of it." "That's very generous of you," Damien wrote. "It's survival," Elena said honestly. "Hating your father won't bring my family back. And you need me. Right now, you need someone who can think clearly and help keep you safe. I can't do that if I'm drowning in hatred. You're stronger than most people," Damien wrote, "vampire or human." Before Elena could respond, there was a knock at the door. One of the seamstresses entered, carrying an enormous box. "Your dress, miss," she said, setting it on the bed. His Majesty requested something that would make a statement. Elena opened the box and gasped. Inside was a gown unlike anything she'd ever seen. It was deep sapphire blue, the color of midnight sky, with silver embroidery that caught the light. The design was elegant, but not overly ornate, appropriate for someone in a position of service, but clearly marking her as someone under royal protection. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "His Majesty chose the colors himself," the seamstress said with a knowing smile. "Blue for loyalty, silver for the royal house. You'll match Prince Damien's formal attire." After the seamstress left, Elena changed into the dress with Elara's help. When she looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked like she belonged in this castle of shadows and silver. Damien's eyes widened when he saw her. He wrote quickly, "You look like a princess." "I look like I'm playing dress-up," Elena said, but she couldn't help smiling. "You look brave," Damien wrote. "That's better than any title." As evening approached, Alaric returned. He'd changed into formal attire, a black suit with silver fastenings, a crown of twisted thorns resting on his dark hair. He looked every inch the powerful, dangerous king he was. But when he saw Damien, now dressed in matching formal wear, his expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Are you ready?" he asked his son. Damien nodded, though Elena could see his hands trembling slightly. "You don't have to speak," Alaric said, "not if it causes pain. I'll do the talking. You just need to stand there and show them you're strong. Can you do that?" Another nod. Alaric turned to Elena. "And you, stay close to Damien. If anyone approaches him, if anyone makes you uncomfortable, you tell me immediately. Understood?" "Yes, Your Majesty." "Alaric," he said suddenly, "when we're private, you may call me Alaric. You've earned that right." Elena blinked. All right. Alaric." Something that might have been approval flickered in his silver eyes. Then he offered his arm to his son. "Come, let's show them what the Thornhaven line is made of." The throne room was enormous, easily 3 times the size of Elena's entire bakery had been. Hundreds of vampires filled the space, all dressed in their finest, all watching with predatory interest as Alaric entered with Damien at his side and Elena just behind. The whispers started immediately. Elena could feel the weight of hundreds of ancient eyes on her, assessing, judging, wondering. Alaric led them to the raised dais at the front of the room. 2 thrones stood there, one large, clearly meant for the king, and one smaller beside it. Damien took his place on the smaller throne, while Elena stood to his right, trying to look confident and failing miserably. Alaric remained standing, his presence commanding instant silence. "Members of the court," he began, his voice carrying effortlessly through the massive space. "You've heard rumors. Allow me to address them directly. My son, Prince Damien, has been ill. Not psychologically, as some of you believed, but physically. He was poisoned." The whispers erupted again, louder this time. Alaric raised a hand, and silence fell once more. The poison was silver, administered deliberately by someone who wished to silence him, to make him appear weak and unfit, to remove him from the line of succession. "And who would do such a thing, Your Majesty?" a voice called from the crowd. Elena recognized the speaker, Lady Morgana, one of the nobles who'd been at the dinner the previous night. "My brother," Alaric said flatly, "Lord Cyrus Thornhaven, in conspiracy with Lady Seraphine of the Eastern Territories. They attempted to murder my heir." The whispers became shouts. Some sounded shocked, but others, Elena noticed with growing dread, sounded almost excited. "That's a serious accusation," another voice called. This one belonged to an ancient vampire with pure white hair and blood-red eyes. "Do you have proof?" "I have my son's testimony," Alaric said. "He witnessed them plotting. He was poisoned immediately after." "The testimony of a child who cannot speak?" the white-haired vampire said. "Forgive me, Your Majesty, but that's hardly reliable evidence. The boy could be mistaken, could be fabricating to gain attention." Damien's hands clenched on the arms of his throne. Elena saw his jaw tighten, saw him prepare to try to speak despite the risk. She acted without thinking. She stepped forward, placing herself between the ancient vampire and Damien. "Prince Damien is not a liar," she said loudly, her voice surprisingly steady. "And he will be able to speak soon enough to defend himself. The poison has been removed. The fragments are evidence themselves, 27 pieces of silver extracted from his throat by the royal healer. "And who are you to address this court?" the white-haired vampire demanded. "I am Elena Vasquez, official companion and protector to Prince Damien, appointed by His Majesty himself." "A human?" the vampire laughed. "A human servant is speaking to vampire nobility? This is—" "Enough, Lord Matthias," Alaric's voice cracked like thunder. "Elena speaks with my authority. Anyone who questions her presence questions me directly. Is that what you wish to do?" Lord Matthias fell silent, but his red eyes promised future trouble. "The facts are these," Alaric continued. "My son was poisoned. My brother has fled. Lady Seraphine has also disappeared. I have declared them both enemies of the crown, and I will hunt them to the ends of the earth if necessary." He paused. "Furthermore, I am formally reaffirming Damien's position as my heir. He is not weak. He is not unfit. He is a victim of an assassination attempt, and he survived. That shows strength, not weakness." "But, Your Majesty," Lady Morgana said carefully, "even if Prince Damien recovers his voice, the fact remains that he is young, inexperienced. Perhaps it would be wise to consider—" "I am not considering alternative heirs," Alaric said coldly. "Damien is my son. He will be king after me. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me personally. I promise you won't enjoy the conversation." The threat was clear. The room fell silent. Then, from his throne, Damien stood. He walked to stand beside his father, and though he still couldn't speak, his violet eyes blazed with determination. He looked out at the court, at all the ancient vampires who had dismissed him and pitied him and written him off, and his expression said clearly, "I am still here. I am still standing. I am still your prince." It was Elena who started the applause. She didn't know if it was appropriate, didn't know if it was allowed, but she clapped her hands together loudly, firmly, in a steady rhythm. After a moment of shocked silence, others joined in. Not everyone. Lord Matthias and his faction remained stone-faced, but enough. Enough to show that Damien still had support, still had loyalty. Damien looked back at Elena, and she could see the gratitude shining in his eyes. The assembly continued for another hour, with various nobles presenting petitions and grievances, but Elena barely heard any of it. She was too focused on watching the crowd, on identifying potential threats, on making mental notes of who had applauded and who hadn't. When it finally ended, Alaric led them back to the private chambers. Once the door closed behind them, Damien collapsed into a chair, exhausted. "You did well," Alaric said quietly. "Both of you." "Lord Matthias is a problem," Elena said. "He and at least a dozen others. They didn't applaud. They looked calculating." "Matthias has been a problem for 200 years, Alaric said. "He's from the old bloodlines, the ones who think strength is everything and compassion is weakness. He won't move against me directly, but he'll cause trouble where he can." "Like supporting Cyrus?" Elena asked. "Possibly. Probably." Alaric moved to a cabinet and poured himself a drink, something dark red that Elena tried not to think about. "Which is why I need you to be vigilant. Matthias and his faction will test you, try to undermine you, perhaps even try to harm you to get to Damien." "I can handle myself," Elena said, with more confidence than she felt. "I know. You've already proven that." Alaric took a sip of his drink. "But handling yourself isn't the same as being prepared. Starting tomorrow, you'll train with my personal guard. Combat, politics, vampire customs, everything you need to know to survive in this court. All right. Damien was writing in his notebook again. He held it up. Thank you, Elena, for speaking when I couldn't, for standing with me. Always, Elena said simply. That's what friends do. Friends, Damien wrote, and his expression was hopeful, almost disbelieving. Friends, Elena confirmed. You're stuck with me now, remember? Your father made it official. For the first time since she'd met him, Damien smiled, a real, genuine smile that transformed his entire face. He looked like what he was, a child who'd been alone for too long, finally finding someone who cared. Elena felt something shift in her chest. She'd come to this castle in chains, a prisoner, expecting to die or wish she was dead. Instead, she'd found purpose, found someone who needed her, found, perhaps, a reason to stay alive. The next 3 days passed in a whirlwind of activity. True to his word, Alaric assigned Elena to train with the Royal Guard, specifically with Captain Theron, a gruff vampire warrior who'd served the Thornhaven line for 4 centuries. You're weak, Theron informed her on the first day, watching her attempt to lift a practice sword. Fragile. Human. Tell me something I don't know, Elena panted. But, Theron continued, you're smart. You notice things, and you don't give up easily. Those qualities might keep you alive. Might. He taught her basic self-defense, focusing on techniques that would work against stronger, faster opponents. How to use surprise, how to target weak points, how to run like hell when necessary. Never try to fight a vampire head-on, Theron said. You'll lose. But if you're smart, you can survive long enough for help to arrive. That's not exactly inspiring, Elena muttered. It's realistic. Inspiration gets humans killed. Strategy keeps them breathing. In between training sessions, Elena spent time with Damien. His throat was healing rapidly. Vampire regeneration was remarkable, and by the 3rd day, he could make small sounds without pain. Elena, he whispered, testing his voice. It was rough, scratchy, but it was sound. Elena. I'm here, she said, grinning. Welcome back to the world of speaking people. Thank you. Each word was careful, deliberate. For everything. You can thank me by telling me more about your collections, Elena said. I want to know everything about those maps on your wall. Damien's face lit up, and he launched into an explanation, still whispered and halting, but growing stronger with each word, of the various territories, the vampire dynasties, the human kingdoms that existed in uneasy alliance with the supernatural world. Elena listened, fascinated. She'd known so little about the world beyond her village. Now she was learning about empires and alliances, about ancient feuds and modern politics. Your village, Damien whispered one evening, his voice still fragile but functional. Blackwater. It was caught between 2 vampire territories, a neutral zone. The hunter who was hiding there had killed vampires from both sides. Father had no choice. If he didn't retaliate, it would look like weakness. Other territories would have invaded. I know, Elena said quietly. I figured that out. Doesn't make it hurt less, but I understand. I'm still sorry, Damien said. You lost everything because of our world, our wars. And now I'm part of that world, Elena said. Might as well learn how it works. On the fourth day, Alaric called them both to his private study. The room was smaller than Elena had expected, lined with books and maps, dominated by an enormous desk covered in papers and correspondence. "Cyrus has made contact," Alaric said, without preamble. "Through intermediaries. He's demanding safe passage to neutral territory and immunity from prosecution. In exchange, he'll relinquish all claims to the throne and reveal his co-conspirators." "You're not actually considering that?" Elena asked. "No. He tried to kill my son. There is no negotiation." Alaric's expression was cold. "But his offer tells me something important. He's scared. He's running out of allies, which means he's dangerous. Cornered animals always are." "What about Lady Seraphine?" Damien asked, his voice almost normal now. "Still missing. We've had reports of her in 3 different territories, all contradictory. She's better at hiding than Cyrus." Alaric leaned back in his chair. "Which brings me to why I called you here. I need to travel to the Eastern Territories personally, to negotiate with the vampires harboring my brother, to make it clear that continuing to shelter him will be considered an act of war." "How long will you be gone?" Elena asked. "A week, perhaps 2, which means Damien will be in charge here, with the council advising, of course, but technically, as Crown Prince, he has authority in my absence." Damien's eyes widened. "Father, I'm 8. I can't." "You can and you will," Alaric said firmly. "You're not actually making major decisions. The council will handle most matters. But you need to be visible. You need to show the court that you're capable, that you're legitimate. That you're not the broken child they thought you were." "I'll be with him," Elena said. "Every moment. I won't let anything happen." "I know. That's the only reason I'm comfortable leaving." Alaric stood and moved to a painting on the wall, a portrait of a beautiful woman with Damien's violet eyes. "Your mother would have handled this better than I have. She would have known what to do, how to protect you while still preparing you to rule." "Mother died when I was 3, Damien said softly. "I barely remember her. She was strong, not in the way vampires value strength, raw power, violence, but in the ways that actually matter. She was wise, compassionate, strategic." Alaric touched the painting gently. "You're like her. That's not a weakness, Damien. It's your greatest asset. Never let anyone convince you otherwise." Elena saw a side of the vampire king she hadn't suspected existed. A man who'd loved and lost, who carried grief like a wound that never fully healed. "I'll make you proud, father," Damien said. "You already have." Alaric left the next morning, taking a contingent of elite guards with him. The castle felt different in his absence, less secure, more watchful. Elena could feel eyes on her and Damien wherever they went, could sense the shifting currents of court politics. Lord Matthias wasted no time testing them. On the second day of Alaric's absence, he requested a formal audience with the acting regent. Damien, dressed in his formal attire, received him in the small throne room, with Elena at his side and Captain Theron standing guard. "Young prince," Matthias said, his voice dripping with false courtesy, "I come with a petition from the Old Blood faction. We believe that in light of recent instability, the succession laws should be reviewed, perhaps amended to include additional safeguards." "Safeguards?" Damien asked carefully. His voice was still slightly rough, but clear enough. "Requirements," Matthias clarified. "Age requirements." "Demonstrations of power. Traditional vampire capabilities." He smiled, showing fangs. "After all, we cannot have a king who is vulnerable, who can be poisoned and silenced so easily." It was a direct insult, delivered with a smile. Elena felt her hands clench into fists. But Damien's expression remained calm. "The succession laws have stood for 8 centuries, Lord Matthias. They were written by the founders of this kingdom. Are you suggesting they were wrong? I'm suggesting that times change. We must adapt. Indeed. Damien leaned forward slightly. Like how you adapted when my father executed your brother for treason 70 years ago. Or how you adapted when your petition to challenge the king's authority was rejected by the High Council. Matthias's smile vanished. Careful, boy. I am not a boy. I am your prince. Damien's voice gained strength. And my father's laws stand. If you wish to petition for changes, you may do so through the proper channels. But I will not entertain discussions that undermine the established order of succession. Is that clear? For a long moment, Matthias just stared at him. Then, slowly, he bowed. Perfectly clear, Your Highness. When he left, Elena let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. That was brilliant. That was terrifying, Damien corrected. I thought he was going to attack me. But you didn't show it, Thorin rumbled from his post. You showed strength. The old vampire respects that, even if he doesn't like you. Hell be back, Elena said, with a different angle. I know. Damien slumped in his throne, suddenly looking every bit the exhausted child he was. But at least I didn't completely embarrass myself. You did great, Elena assured him. Your father will be proud when he hears about this. Over the next week, similar challenges came from various quarters. The court was testing Damien, seeing if he would break under pressure. But with Elena's support and Theron's protection, he handled each one with growing confidence. Elena found herself falling into a strange routine. Morning training with Theron, afternoons advising Damien on petitions and court matters. She brought a human perspective that often cut through the complex vampire politics. Evenings in the library or Damien's chambers, talking about everything and nothing. She was sleeping better now, eating regularly for the first time since the massacre. The nightmares were still there, but they were fading, replaced by new concerns, new purposes. On the 8th day, a messenger arrived with news. Alaric was returning, and he was bringing Cyrus with him in chains. The entire court assembled to witness the arrival. Elena stood with Damien on the castle steps, watching as Alaric's party rode through the gates. In the center of the formation, bound with silver chains that smoked against his skin, was Cyrus Thornhaven. He looked nothing like his brother. Where Alaric was cold and controlled, Cyrus was wild-eyed and desperate. His clothes were torn, his hair matted with dirt. He looked like he'd been dragged through hell, which, Elena reflected, he probably had been. Alaric dismounted and strode up the steps. "Prince Damien," he said formally, "I return control of the kingdom to you, to hold until I reclaim my throne." It was ceremony, tradition. Damien bowed his head. "The kingdom is yours, father. I have merely kept it safe in your absence." "And so you have." Alaric's expression warmed almost imperceptibly. Then he turned to address the assembled court. "Cyrus Thornhaven stands accused of high treason, attempted regicide, and conspiracy to murder the crown prince. He will be tried before the High Council tomorrow at dawn. His crimes are beyond forgiveness, but justice demands a proper trial." Cyrus was dragged away by guards, still struggling against the silver chains. His eyes found Damien for just a moment, and the hate in them was palpable. "Hell, try something," Elena murmured to Damien. "Before the trial, he's desperate." "I know," Damien whispered back, "but father's here now. We're safe." Elena wasn't so sure. She'd learned enough about vampire politics to know that desperate vampires were deadly vampires, and Cyrus had nothing left to lose. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. Something felt wrong, though she couldn't identify what. She paced her small chamber, then finally gave up and decided to check on Damien. His room was just down the hall. 2 guards stood outside. They nodded to her as she approached. She knocked softly. No answer. "Prince Damien?" she called. Still nothing. A cold feeling spread through her chest. "Open the door," she told the guards. "But miss, the prince requested not to be disturbed." "Open it now." One guard produced a key and unlocked the door. Elena pushed past him into the room. Empty. The bed was undisturbed. The window was open, curtains billowing in the night breeze. "No," Elena breathed. "No, no." She ran to the window and looked out. Far below, she could see figures moving in the garden. One small, one larger. Even from this distance, she recognized Damien's distinctive silhouette. And the vampire with him was Lady Seraphine. "Alert the king!" Elena shouted at the guards. "Now!" Then she did something incredibly stupid. She climbed out the window onto the narrow ledge that ran along the castle wall. "Miss, you'll fall," one guard called. Elena ignored him. There was a drainage pipe a few feet away. She'd noticed it during one of her exploratory walks with Damien. If she could reach it, she could climb down. She stretched, grabbed the pipe, and started descending. The metal was cold and slippery under her hands, but adrenaline gave her strength she didn't know she had. She dropped the last 6 feet, landed hard, rolled, and came up running toward the garden. Damien was standing near the fountain, facing Seraphine. Even from a distance, Elena could see he was terrified. "Just need you to come with me quietly," Seraphine was saying as Elena approached. "Your uncle promises no harm will come to you. He simply wants to talk." "My uncle tried to kill me," Damien said, his voice shaking but clear. "A misunderstanding. The poison was never meant to be fatal, just to keep you quiet for a while. You're too valuable to kill, young prince. You're leverage." "Leverage for what?" "For everything." Seraphine smiled, and it was a terrible thing to see. "Did you think this was just about succession? This is about the future of our kind. Your father is weak, compassionate, too friendly with humans. Cyrus will bring us back to the old ways, the proper ways." "No," Damien said, "I won't go with you." Seraphine's expression hardened. "Then I'll carry you." She moved with vampire speed, but Elena was already there. She'd grabbed a garden rake, a pathetically inadequate weapon, and swung it with all her strength at Seraphine's head. It connected with a satisfying crack.